Heather Hiscox joins us now live from the Vatican this hour. Heather's going to be hosting our CBC News special coverage of the Pope's funeral. Heather, really good to see you. Tell us more about what's happening all around you and what we can expect for Saturday.
Natasha, I will. Welcome. Good afternoon from St. Peter's Square here in Vatican City. And as you suggested, we are here for the second day of Pope Francis lying in state. And as expected, the crowd numbers have only continued to swell since we arrived yesterday, Natasha. The latest updated number, at least 60,000 people so far have paid respects inside St. Peter's Basilica. There were so many people in line late last night, they had to extend the visitation beyond midnight, and it looks likely they might have to do the same again this evening. We'll let you know. I want to introduce you, though, this morning to someone with whom you're going to become quite familiar over the next couple of days, because he's going to be with me as we broadcast the funeral on Saturday of Pope Francis. This is Father Darren Dias. He's the executive director of the Toronto School of Theology, just off the plane and right here to St. Peter's Square. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm
nice
glad to
be
see
here.
you and looking forward to sharing these days with you.
Thanks very much.
It sounds like we had similar experiences on the plane. People around me watching the movie Conclave, and you saw that too.
There were plenty of people watching Conclave on the flight over from Toronto yesterday. And I can also say that there were a couple of bishops and cardinals on that plane, so they were also watching. So everyone's watching that movie.
A little refresher for them.
Well, I think they're going to fact check that movie in the next few days.
It's true. I was noticing 283% increase in streaming of Conclave since the death of Pope Francis. Incredible.
I bet. But I mean, as one of them said, it is fiction. So we'll see what the real conclave looks like in the next few weeks.
This is the very real situation behind us as we look. And I'm wondering, you've just arrived here in St. Peter's Square. You've been here many times before. But at this moment, what are your first impressions?
I'm actually surprised at how calm, how serene it is in the square. There's a lot of people, but it's very orderly. It's very calm. The lines are moving fairly quickly, considering the numbers fairly quickly. I think it's 4 or 5 hours. And there's a spirit of sort of respect, and I think there's a sense that, we're going to miss somebody. There's somebody who is often here who's no longer here. Like that happens sometimes in families where you're used to, a father, a mother, a grandparent, and when they go, they're not there, and you look at the dinner table and you look at their empty chair, and that's what it feels like a bit, even though his remains are in the Basilica now.
Personal connection to Pope Francis, even those who are not Catholic, expressing that to the people to whom I've spoken thus far. You've also been watching the images that people at home are seeing, and that is the simplicity of the coffin, but the majesty of the sanctuary inside that basilica. And as you see those pictures and how these stages of remembrance are going for Pope Francis, again, what are your thoughts?
I think you're right, Heather, that contrast between the simplicity of Pope Francis's casket. He chose not to have a raised casket. It's on the floor. He chose not to have the triple casket of cypress, oak, and lead, and instead just the oak with a zinc lining casket. You can see that simplicity, and I think when we see his mortal remains, we remember him as a pretty simple man, not big on ceremony. We can think of him in these big ceremonies like canonizations or state affairs, and he actually didn't smile very much. But when he was with people, children, refugees, the poor, he came alive. So I think that simplicity is captured in the setting of that simple casket in this magnificent setting of the Basilica, where he spent his last few days visiting people.
I was at Santa Maria Maggiore, where he's going to be buried, his final resting place not too far from here, and I happened to encounter a group of pilgrims from the Ottawa area, and they waited in that line 4 or 5 hours because they wanted to pay respects. And what they did in that brief moment before the coffin was just say a prayer, but a blessing, they said, for the gift of Pope Francis and his service. And I'm wondering, as you've heard tributes over these past couple of days, what have been the themes that have stood out to you and that we'll be talking about on Saturday?
Well, I think that's right. The theme of service. He really was a person of service. In fact, maybe he was a workaholic or a serviceaholic. Even his last few weeks from the hospital bed, he was still working, and then he came, even in his illness, we thought he was getting better, but in fact, he passed away on Monday. So I think his dedication to service, but to service not just to an institution, but for people. He was really concerned with the marginalized and the poor, and when he reformed, for instance, the bureaucracy, the Roman Curia, as it's called, he asked, how can this be of service to people? How does all these mechanisms, how do they help those who are in most need? So I think that's going to be one thing that he's really remembered for, in addition to important teachings like his teaching on ecology, or his teaching around discernment and synodality, or his relationship with the non-Christian world, with the Arab and Muslim world, was very important to him. So I think he'll be remembered as somebody that of deep human relations.
I'm looking forward to these days. We have a lot to discuss when we look at the full vastness of the legacy that is Pope Francis. And thank you very much for this conversation. Many more to come with Father Dias. Natasha?